Get out of the car. Hands where I can see them. The voice cut through the quiet street like a siren before the lights even flashed, and for a second, everything seemed to pause. The hum of the engine, the distant traffic, even the wind brushing against a row of parked cars. Naomi Carter didn't move right away. Her fingers rested lightly on the steering wheel, steady, controlled, while red and blue reflections slid across the windshield and painted her face in alternating color. She exhaled once, slow and measured, then reached up and turned off the ignition. The engine died with a soft click, leaving only the ticking sound of cooling metal and the faint static from a police radio outside. In the side mirror, she saw them step out. 2 officers, silhouettes sharpened by flashing lights, posture rigid, hands resting near their belts like habit had taught them long ago. One of them, taller, broader, walked straight toward her door without hesitation. He tapped the glass twice, firm, impatient. "Ma'am, step out of the vehicle." Naomi turned her head slightly, meeting his reflection instead of his eyes, studying the angle of his stance, the tension in his shoulders, the assumption already settled in his voice. She unlocked the door and pushed it open slowly, the hinges creaking just enough to be heard in the quiet. Cool night air slipped in, carrying the faint scent of asphalt and distant rain. As she stepped out, her shoes met the pavement with a soft, deliberate sound, and for a moment, she stood there, upright, composed, hands visible at her sides. The officer took a half step closer, scanning her face, her clothes, her car, like he was building a story in his head and fitting her into it piece by piece. "License and registration," he said, his tone flat, but edged with something sharper underneath. Naomi nodded once, calm, and reached back into the car, movements slow and precise. The second officer circled behind her, his footsteps crunching lightly against gravel near the curb, his presence close enough to feel but not see. A passing car slowed, headlights washing over the scene, then continued on, leaving the street dim again except for the relentless pulse of red and blue. Naomi handed over her license. The officer glanced at it briefly, then back at her, then again at the card, as if something didn't quite match the picture he had already decided on. "Step over here," he said, gesturing toward the front of the patrol car. Naomi complied without a word, her steps even, her posture unchanged. The hood of the patrol car was still warm, reflecting the lights in fractured patterns. He placed her license down, radio crackling at his shoulder. "Dispatch, I need to check on a vehicle," he said, voice now more official, more certain. Naomi stood quietly, her gaze drifting past them for just a second, to the empty street, the quiet houses, the stillness that had settled like a held breath. Then she looked back at the officer, not defiant, not afraid, just present. He didn't notice the difference. Not yet. To him, she was already defined, already understood. And Naomi let that belief stay exactly where it was, untouched, as if she had decided something long before he ever turned on those lights. The radio hissed softly against the officer's shoulder, a low, constant whisper that filled the silence between words. Officer Ryan Cole kept his eyes on Naomi as he spoke into it again, slower this time, as if repeating it would make the answer come back cleaner. "Run the name again," he said, tapping the edge of the hood with 2 fingers. The metal made a dull sound under his touch, steady, controlled, just like his voice. Naomi stood where he had placed her, the flashing lights stretching her shadow long across the pavement, bending and straightening with every pulse. Her hands rested at her sides, relaxed, not clenched, not raised, simply there. The second officer shifted his weight behind her, boots scraping lightly as he glanced from her to the car and back again, uncertainty flickering for just a moment before disappearing under routine. "You mind telling us where you are headed tonight?" Ryan asked without looking up from the license. Naomi answered evenly, her voice calm, almost quiet, but clear enough to carry through the air. "Home." One word. No explanation, no added detail. Ryan gave a short, humorless breath, something close to a laugh, but not quite. "That's so," he said, finally lifting his eyes to meet hers directly. For a second, there was a pause, small but noticeable, like something in her expression did not match what he expected. It passed quickly. He looked back down, flipping the license over in his hand, as if the answer might be written on the back. A car rolled by at the end of the street, slowing just enough for the driver to glance at the scene before moving on, headlights fading into the distance. The neighborhood remained quiet, windows dark, porches empty, the kind of stillness that made every small sound feel louder than it was. The radio crackled again. Static first, then a voice, distant, slightly distorted. Ryan leaned closer, brows tightening as he tried to catch it. "Say again," he replied, sharper now. Naomi's gaze shifted briefly to the radio, then back to him, her face unchanged, but her breathing slower now, deeper, like she had settled into something already decided. The second officer stepped closer to the patrol car, glancing at the screen inside, then back at Ryan. "You getting anything?" he asked quietly. Ryan did not answer right away. His jaw moved slightly, tension building in a place he could not quite name. He pressed the button again. "Dispatch, confirm identity," he said, more firm this time, as if certainty could be forced through repetition. The static returned, louder now, stretching the moment thin. Naomi watched him, not with challenge, not with fear, just with a steady patience that did not match the situation. It was the kind of stillness that did not come from not knowing what would happen next, but from already knowing how it would end. Ryan exhaled through his nose, shifting his stance, trying to reassert control over a moment that had started to slip just slightly out of rhythm. He tapped the license once more against the hood, then set it down flat, aligning it carefully with the edge like that small act could bring everything back into place. Behind him, the radio clicked again, the voice returning clearer this time, and before the words fully formed, something in his posture changed, subtle, almost invisible, like the ground beneath him had shifted just enough for him to feel it. The voice came through clean this time, no distortion, no hesitation, just clear enough to settle into the air like a statement that could not be taken back. Confirming identity. Naomi Carter. Date of birth matches. Stand by for rank verification. The words hung there, suspended between the crackle of the radio and the quiet street. Ryan did not move at first. His fingers rested on the edge of the hood. Still, the slight tap he had been making gone without him noticing. He glanced down at the license again, as if it might have changed in the last few seconds, then back at Naomi. She had not shifted. Not an inch. The red and blue lights continued to pass over her face, steady, rhythmic, but her expression stayed the same, composed, patient, almost detached from the tension building around her. The second officer took a small step closer, his voice lower now, edged with something that was no longer routine. "What did they say?" Ryan did not answer right away. His jaw tightened, the muscle near his cheek flexing once before he reached for the radio again, pressing the button with more force than necessary. "Dispatch, confirm rank," he said, each word measured, controlled, but carrying a strain that had not been there before. A pause followed, longer this time, the kind of silence that stretches just enough to make every second feel deliberate. Naomi's eyes moved briefly to the radio, then back to Ryan, watching, not interrupting, not helping, just allowing the moment to unfold exactly as it was. Somewhere down the block, a porch light flicked on, casting a soft glow onto the sidewalk, but no one stepped outside. The street remained still, holding its breath. The radio clicked again. "Stand by." The voice repeated, quieter now, almost cautious. Ryan exhaled slowly, a breath he did not realize he had been holding, and shifted his stance, squaring his shoulders as if preparing for something he could not yet define. He reached for the license again, picking it up, turning it over once more, his thumb brushing along the edge like he was searching for something he had missed. "You ever been stopped before?" he asked suddenly, the question coming out sharper than intended. Naomi's answer came just as steady. "Yes." Nothing more. No story, no defense. Just the truth, offered without weight. That seemed to unsettle him more than anything else. He looked at her again, longer this time, studying her face, her posture, the way she stood without resistance, but without submission. It did not fit. Not the way he expected. The second officer shifted again, glancing toward the patrol car, then back at Ryan. "Maybe we should just wait," he said quietly. Ryan did not respond. His focus stayed on Naomi, searching, recalculating, trying to reconcile what he was hearing with what he believed he already knew. The radio clicked once more, louder this time, the sound cutting through everything. And before the next words even formed, something inside him tightened, like instinct was warning him a second too late that the moment he thought he controlled was already slipping out of his hands. Confirming rank. Captain. Repeat. Captain Naomi Carter. The words landed heavier than the first confirmation, not louder, not sharper, but final in a way that left no room to question what had just been said. The radio fell silent immediately after, like even the voice on the other end understood that nothing else needed to follow. Ryan did not press the button again. His hand stayed frozen near the radio, fingers slightly curled, as if the motion had been interrupted halfway through. For a brief second, the flashing lights seemed brighter, reflecting off the hood, off the badge on his chest, off the license still in his hand. He looked at it again, slower this time, reading the name as if he had never seen it before. Naomi Carter. The same name. The same face. But now it carried weight he had not assigned to it minutes ago. The second officer took a step back without realizing it, his posture shifting, shoulders lowering just slightly, as uncertainty settled in where confidence had been. Captain, he repeated under his breath, the word unfamiliar in this context, like it did not belong to the scene they had just created. Ryan finally lifted his eyes to Naomi, really looking at her now, not scanning, not judging, just looking. Her stance had not changed. Hands still at her sides, shoulders relaxed, gaze steady. She had not interrupted. She had not corrected them. She had simply waited. That realization moved through him slower than the words on the radio, but it hit deeper. The silence stretched. No traffic. No voices. Just the low hum of the patrol car engine and the faint ticking of heat rising off metal. Ryan swallowed once, his throat tight, and straightened his posture, almost instinctively, like training had finally caught up with reality. Ma'am, he started, the word coming out uneven, unfamiliar after everything that had come before. He stopped, adjusted, then tried again. Captain. The title felt heavier, more deliberate, like something he had to place carefully. Between them. Naomi did not respond right away. She watched him, her expression unchanged, but her eyes sharper now, more present, as if she was no longer observing but measuring. The second officer shifted again, glancing between them, unsure where to stand, where to look, what role he now played in a moment that had rewritten itself. Ryan placed the license back on the hood, aligning it again out of habit, though the motion lacked the certainty it had before. There has been a misunderstanding, he said, his voice more controlled now, but carrying something underneath it, something closer to awareness than authority. Naomi took a small step forward, closing the distance just enough to change the space between them. The lights moved across her face again, but this time, they did not define her. They reflected off her, like something external, something temporary. Was there? She asked quietly. Not accusing, not raised, just a question, simple and direct. Ryan did not answer immediately. For the first time since the stop began, he did not have one ready. The silence that followed was different now, not tense, not uncertain, but revealing. And in that silence, the moment shifted completely, from control to consequence, from assumption to truth. Ryan's mouth opened slightly, then closed again, like the words he had were no longer enough for the moment he stood in. The air felt different now, heavier, as if the truth had weight, and it had just settled between them. He shifted his stance, straighter this time, shoulders pulled back not out of control but correction. Captain, he said again, quieter, more deliberate, the title no longer forced but acknowledged. Naomi's gaze stayed on him, steady and unreadable, not offering relief, not escalating, simply holding the moment in place. The second officer lowered his eyes briefly, his earlier certainty gone, replaced by something closer to reflection. The flashing lights continued their rhythm, but they no longer commanded the scene. They just existed, like background noise to something more important unfolding. Ryan cleared his throat, his hand moving to his belt, not out of habit now, but uncertainty, as if searching for something familiar to hold on to. We followed protocol, he said, though even he seemed to hear how thin it sounded in the quiet. Naomi tilted her head just slightly, not dismissing, not agreeing, just considering. Did you? She asked her. Voice still calm, but now carrying something deeper, something that reached past the surface of procedure into intention. Ryan's eyes dropped for a fraction of a second, then lifted again, but the hesitation remained. The second officer glanced toward the patrol car, then back at Naomi, his posture no longer squared, his presence smaller somehow, like he was trying to take up less space in a moment that was no longer his to control. A faint breeze moved through the street, brushing against uniforms and fabric, carrying with it the distant sound of a car door closing somewhere far away. Ordinary sounds, returning slowly, as if the world outside had resumed while this small space remained suspended. Naomi stepped forward one more pace, close enough now that the distance between them felt intentional rather than accidental. Her voice lowered slightly, not softer, just more focused. "You made a decision before you knew anything about me," she said. No accusation, just a statement, placed carefully, like evidence on a table. Ryan inhaled, deeper this time, his chest rising and falling as he searched for a response that would hold. "We assessed the situation," he replied, but the words lacked the firmness they might have carried minutes ago. Naomi's eyes did not leave his. "You assumed the situation," she corrected, the difference between the two words landing quietly but firmly. The second officer shifted again, his gaze dropping to the pavement, the reflection of the lights stretching across the ground like lines that could not be crossed back over. Ryan nodded once, a small movement, but real. The first sign that something inside him had shifted. "Understood," he said, though it sounded less like agreement and more like realization arriving too late. Naomi let the silence settle again, not rushing to fill it, allowing the weight of what had just been said to remain where it was. Then, after a moment, she reached for her license on the hood, her fingers brushing the surface briefly before lifting it, smooth, controlled, deliberate. She looked at it once, then back at him. "Respect is not situational," she said quietly. "It does not wait for a title." The words did not echo, but they stayed, lingering in the space between them long after they were spoken. Ryan straightened fully now, no hesitation left in the motion, but something else had replaced it, something closer to awareness than authority. "Yes, Captain," he said, this time without pause, without resistance. Naomi held his gaze for one final second, then stepped back, creating space again, not retreating, just resetting the distance on her own terms. The lights continued to flash, but the moment had already changed, and nothing about it could be undone. The silence did not break right away. It lingered, stretched thin between them, carried by the steady pulse of red and blue light that no longer felt like control, but like a reminder. Naomi turned slightly, her attention shifting from Ryan to the street around them, taking in the quiet houses, the empty sidewalks, the stillness that had watched everything unfold without saying a word. Then she looked back at him, not with distance, but with intention, like the moment was not over yet. "How long have you been on patrol tonight?" she asked. The question caught Ryan off guard, simple but unexpected, pulling him out of the narrow frame he had been operating in. "About 4 hours," he answered after a beat, his voice steadier now, but no longer sharp. Naomi nodded once, absorbing it, then glanced briefly at the second officer. "And you?" The younger officer straightened slightly, as if being addressed directly carried weight he had not anticipated. 2 years on the force," he said, his voice quieter, but honest. Naomi held his gaze for a moment, then returned to Ryan. "Long enough to know the difference between caution and assumption," she said, not harsh, not raised, just clear. Ryan did not argue. He could not. His hands rested at his sides now, no longer searching for routine, no longer anchored in habit. "Yes, Captain," he said again, but this time it sounded less like compliance and more like acknowledgement. Naomi took a slow breath, the cool air filling her lungs, then releasing just as steadily. "You did not ask me where I was coming from," she continued. "You did not ask why I was here. You decided before you understood." Each sentence landed evenly, not stacked, not rushed, just placed one after the other with quiet precision. The second officer shifted his weight again, his eyes moving between them, absorbing each word like it was meant for him too. A faint sound of a passing car echoed from a distant street, then faded again, leaving them in that same pocket of stillness. Naomi stepped toward her car, her hand brushing lightly against the door as if grounding herself in something familiar. "This uniform," she said, though she was not wearing one, "does not give you the right to assume who deserves respect." She looked back at them, her expression unchanged, but her presence sharper now, more defined. It gives you the responsibility to offer it first. Ryan's shoulders lowered slightly, the last trace of resistance leaving him, replaced by something quieter, something more reflective. Understood, he said, the word no longer automatic, but considered. Naomi opened her car door, pausing for just a second before getting in, her hand resting on the frame. She looked at Ryan one more time, not to correct, not to challenge, but to make sure the moment had settled where it needed to. The next person you stop will not have a title to correct you, she said. Remember that. The words stayed in the air long after she slid into the driver's seat. The engine started with a low hum, steady, controlled, the sound filling the silence that had once belonged to them. Ryan stepped back instinctively, giving her space, his posture now fully reset, not by rank, but by realization. The second officer stood still, watching as the car's headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the road ahead. Naomi did not rush. She pulled away slowly, deliberately, the flashing lights fading behind her with each passing second. The street returned to quiet, but something had shifted, something that could not be undone, not by protocol, not by habit. Ryan remained standing by the patrol car, the red and blue lights still moving across his uniform, but now they felt different, not like authority, but like a reflection of a moment he would not forget. The patrol car sat idling for a long moment after her taillights disappeared, the engine humming low like it did not know whether to move or stay. Ryan remained where he was, eyes fixed on the empty stretch of road Naomi had just taken, as if the silence she left behind carried more weight than the stop itself. The flashing lights continued their rhythm, but now they felt out of place, too loud for a street that had already settled back into stillness. The second officer shifted beside him, glancing at the radio, then at Ryan, then down at the pavement where the reflection of red and blue stretched and bent with every pulse. You think she meant that? He asked quietly, not looking up. Ryan did not answer right away. His hand moved slowly to the light bar controls, fingers hovering for a second before switching them off. The sudden darkness felt immediate, almost sharp, like something had been pulled away too quickly. The street returned to its natural color, dim and ordinary, and for the first time since the stop began, there was nothing artificial shaping the scene. She did not have to say anything, Ryan said finally, his voice lower now, stripped of the tone he had carried earlier. That is the point. The second officer nodded slightly, absorbing it, though his posture still carried uncertainty. He leaned lightly against the patrol car, folding his arms, not out of authority but thought. I did not see it, he admitted after a moment. Not until the radio. Ryan let out a slow breath, his gaze dropping briefly to the hood where the license had been, where everything had shifted without warning. That is because we were not looking, he replied. The words came without edge, without defensiveness, just a quiet recognition of something he could not undo. A porch light flicked off down the street, one of the last signs that anyone had been watching at all. The neighborhood settled fully now, the earlier tension dissolving into the kind of quiet that felt almost normal, except it was not the same as before. Ryan straightened slightly, rolling his shoulders back, not to reclaim authority, but to reset himself. He reached for the radio again, this time with purpose, pressing the button once. Dispatch, traffic stop concluded, he said, his tone even, but different now, measured in a way it had not been before. No further action. The response came back short and routine, but it did not carry the same weight it had earlier. He released the button and let his hand drop. The second officer pushed off the car, standing upright again, though his stance was more grounded now, less reactive. What happens next? He asked. Ryan looked down the road once more, then back at him. Next time, he said slowly, choosing each word with care, we ask before we decide. The second officer nodded, more certain this time, like the lesson had settled into something he could hold on to. Ryan walked around to the driver's side, opening the door, then paused with his hand resting on the frame. He glanced once more at the empty street, the place where everything had changed without force, without noise, just through presence and truth. Then he got in, closing the door with a soft, controlled sound. The engine rose slightly as he shifted into drive, the patrol car rolling forward at a steady pace. No lights, no urgency, just movement. And as they pulled away, the street behind them stayed quiet, unchanged on the surface, but carrying something beneath it now, something that would follow them long after the night ended. Naomi drove in silence for several blocks, the steady rhythm of her tires against the asphalt grounding the moment in something real again, something ordinary, yet her hands on the steering wheel remained firm, deliberate, as if the weight of what had just happened had not fully left her. Streetlights passed overhead in measured intervals, casting brief shadows across her face, then letting them fade just as quickly. She did not turn on the radio. She did not reach for her phone. The quiet inside the car felt earned, not empty, but filled with thought that did not need words. At a red light, she slowed to a stop, the engine idling softly beneath her. The intersection was empty, for directions of stillness meeting under a single set of lights that blinked from yellow to red. She rested her fingers lightly against the wheel, then lifted one hand, glancing at it for just a second. No shaking, no tension, just stillness. She lowered it again. A memory moved through her, not loud, not vivid, just present. Another night, another stop. No rank, no title, just a younger version of herself standing in the same position, answering the same kind of questions, carrying the same calm, because there had been no other choice. She exhaled slowly, the breath leaving her shoulders as much as her chest. The light turned green. She did not accelerate immediately, just a second longer. Then she pressed the gas gently, moving forward with the same controlled pace she had kept all night. A few miles later, the city began to shift around her, houses giving way to wider streets, brighter lights, a quiet sign marking the entrance to the district station ahead. The building stood clean and still, glass reflecting the overhead lights, the flag near the entrance hanging motionless in the night air. Naomi turned into the lot, her headlights sweeping across parked vehicles, familiar shapes lined in quiet order. She parked near the entrance, but did not get out right away. The engine stayed running for a moment, low and steady, like it was waiting for her to decide something. She looked at the building through the windshield, at the door she would walk through not as a visitor, not as an observer, but as the person responsible for everything inside. Her reflection stared back at her faintly in the glass, layered over the image of the station, two versions of the same presence existing in the same frame. She reached up and turned off the engine. The silence that followed was immediate and complete. No hum, no movement, just stillness. She picked up her phone, the screen lighting her face briefly, then dimming as she opened a message thread. Her thumb hovered for a second before she typed a short line, precise, direct. I am here. She sent it, then set the phone down in the center console. Outside, the automatic doors of the station slid open as someone exited, a uniformed officer stepping out into the night, adjusting his cap as he walked toward his car. He glanced briefly in Naomi's direction, then away, not recognizing her yet, not knowing the shift that was already underway. Naomi opened her door and stepped out, her shoes meeting the pavement with a quiet, steady sound. The air felt cooler here, sharper somehow, carrying the faint scent of metal and concrete. She closed the door behind her and stood for just a moment, looking at the building, at the lights spilling out from inside, at the space she was about to enter. Then she began to walk, each step measured, unhurried, but certain, the distance between the street and the station closing with every quiet movement forward. The glass doors slid open before she reached them, sensing her approach before anyone inside did, and a wave of bright, steady light spilled across the concrete, cutting through the quiet night behind her. Naomi stepped inside without breaking her pace, the sound of her footsteps shifting from soft pavement to polished floor, sharper now, more defined, echoing lightly through the open lobby. The air inside was warmer, carrying the faint scent of paper, coffee, and something metallic that lingered in places where work never fully stopped. A desk sergeant looked up from a monitor, his fingers pausing mid-typing as his eyes moved toward her, scanning first out of routine, then lingering a fraction longer than usual. He did not recognize her yet, but something in her presence made him straighten slightly, posture adjusting without instruction. Evening, he said, his tone neutral but attentive. Naomi gave a small nod as she passed, not slowing, her gaze moving across the room with quiet awareness. Officers moved in and out of the hallway beyond, voices low, conversations half finished, the rhythm of a station mid-shift continuing without interruption. A bulletin board near the wall held notices, schedules, names arranged in neat lines that defined order, hierarchy, routine. Naomi's eyes flicked across it for a second, then forward again. From the corridor ahead, a man stepped into view, mid-conversation with someone behind him, his voice trailing off as he noticed her approaching. He slowed instinctively, his expression shifting from casual to uncertain in the span of a heartbeat. Naomi did not stop. She walked past him with the same measured pace, the same controlled presence, and he turned slightly as she passed, watching, trying to place her without asking. The hallway lights reflected off the floor beneath her, each step mirrored briefly, then gone. A door at the end of the corridor stood closed, a simple nameplate beside it catching the light just enough to be readable. She stopped there, her hand lifting toward the handle, then pausing for a brief second before making contact. The cool metal grounded her, steady, familiar. She opened the door and stepped inside. The office was quiet, untouched, the faint scent of fresh polish still lingering in the air. A desk stood centered beneath a wide window, the city lights beyond stretching into the distance, small points of brightness against the dark. A single chair faced the desk, another behind it, both perfectly aligned as if waiting for someone to decide which side to take. Naomi closed the door behind her with a soft, controlled motion, the click of the latch settling into the silence. She walked around the desk slowly, her fingers brushing lightly along its edge, feeling the smooth surface beneath her touch. No rush, no hesitation, just presence. She reached the chair behind it and rested her hand on the back for a moment before pulling it out. The sound was quiet, but clear, a shift in the room that did not need announcement. She sat down, straightening slightly, her posture natural but grounded, as if the space had already begun to shape itself around her. Her eyes moved across the desk, taking in the files stacked neatly, the pen placed precisely at the center, the blank notepad waiting without instruction. She picked up the pen, turning it once between her fingers, then set it back down in the same place. Outside the door, footsteps passed, voices low, unaware. Inside, the room held still, not empty, but expectant. Naomi leaned back slightly, her gaze lifting toward the window, toward the city beyond, the place where moments like the one earlier had already begun to fade into the night. But here, in this room, nothing had faded. Everything was still present. Everything was about to begin. The office remained still, but the silence no longer felt empty. It held weight now, the kind that comes before something shifts. Naomi's eyes stayed on the city for a moment longer, watching the distant headlights move like quiet signals through the dark. Then she lowered her gaze back to the desk. The clock on the wall ticked once, then again, each second measured, deliberate. A soft knock came at the door. Not loud, not rushed, just enough to break the stillness without disturbing it. Naomi did not answer immediately. She let the second pass, then another, before speaking. Come in. The door opened slowly, revealing a man in his late 50s, posture straight, uniform crisp, but his expression careful, as if he had already been thinking through what to say before stepping inside. Captain Carter, he said, the title landing with practiced respect, but something underneath it felt uncertain, like he was still adjusting to its reality. Naomi nodded once, acknowledging him without inviting more than what was necessary. Deputy Chief Warren, she replied, her voice even, grounded. He stepped further into the room, closing the door behind him with a quiet click, his hand lingering on the handle for just a fraction longer than needed. I was informed you had arrived, he said, moving toward the desk but stopping short of the chair, choosing to stand instead. Naomi watched him, not interrupting, allowing him to settle into the space on his own terms. Earlier than expected, he added, a small shift in his tone suggesting that the timing mattered. Naomi leaned back slightly in her chair, her hands resting lightly on the armrests. I prefer to see things as they are, she said. No emphasis, just truth. Warren gave a short nod, his eyes moving briefly across the desk, the room, then back to her. The department is structured, he began, choosing his words carefully. We have protocols in place to ensure consistency. Naomi did not react immediately. Her gaze held steady, her posture unchanged. I noticed, she said after a moment, her voice carrying no judgment, but no agreement either. The space between them shifted, subtle but real. Warren adjusted his stance, his shoulders tightening slightly before relaxing again. There are expectations, he continued, from the city, from the officers, from the community. Naomi's eyes narrowed just a fraction, not in resistance, but in focus. And from within, she added quietly. Warren paused. The addition settled between them, not confrontational, but precise. He studied her for a moment, as if recalibrating his understanding of the conversation itself. Yes, he said finally. From within. Naomi leaned forward slightly now, her hands moving from the armrests to the desk, fingers resting lightly on its surface. Then we begin there, she said. The words were simple, but they carried direction, not suggestion. Warren held her gaze, the silence stretching again, but this time it was not uncertain. It was evaluative. He nodded once, slower than before. Understood, Captain. Naomi did not respond with words. She simply reached for the notepad on the desk, pulling it slightly closer, the paper sliding with a soft, controlled sound. She picked up the pen again, holding it steady for a second before writing the first line. The motion was small, almost quiet, but it marked something larger. Warren watched for a moment longer, then stepped back toward the door, his hand reaching for the handle once more. If you need anything, he said, the sentence trailing slightly as if he was leaving space for more. Naomi did not look up from the page. I will, she replied, her voice steady, already focused on what came next. The door closed behind him with a soft click, sealing the room again in that same stillness, but it was different now. Not waiting, not uncertain, just moving forward, one deliberate action at a time. The pen moved steadily across the page, each word written with the same controlled precision she had carried through the night, the ink settling into the paper as if it had been waiting for this moment to exist. Naomi did not rush. She did not pause. The first line became a second, then a third, the structure forming quietly beneath her hand. Outside her office, the station continued its rhythm, footsteps passing, voices low, phones ringing and stopping, the sound of work in motion, unaware of the shift already taking shape behind a closed door. A faint murmur drifted in from the hallway, then faded again, replaced by the soft ticking of the clock and the subtle scratch of pen against paper. Naomi stopped for a moment, her eyes scanning what she had written, not searching for correction, but for clarity. Then she set the pen down, aligning it carefully with the edge of the notepad, the small motion deliberate, grounding. Another knock came, lighter this time, almost hesitant. She glanced toward the door, then back to the page for a second before responding. Come in. The door opened slowly, revealing the younger officer from earlier, his posture more cautious now, less certain, as if the space itself required a different version of him. He stepped inside, closing the door gently behind him, his eyes moving briefly around the room before settling on Naomi. Captain, he said, the word quieter than before, but steadier. Naomi looked up at him, her expression neutral, but attentive. Officer, she began, leaving space for him to complete it. Daniels, he said quickly, stepping forward a fraction, then stopping again, unsure how close was appropriate. Naomi nodded once. Officer Daniels. The acknowledgement settled him slightly, his shoulders lowering just enough to show it. He glanced down at his hands, then back up, his breath measured as if he had rehearsed what he was about to say. I wanted to say, earlier, he started, then paused, the words catching as he searched for the right shape. Naomi did not interrupt. She waited, her stillness giving him room to continue. I did not question it, he said finally. I should have. The admission came out simple, without defense, without excuse. Naomi watched him for a moment, her gaze steady, not soft, not hard, just present. Why did you not? She asked. The question was direct, but not confrontational, placed carefully, like everything else she had said. Daniels shifted his weight slightly, the answer forming slower this time. Because it felt normal, he said. Because I thought that was how it was supposed to go. The words lingered, heavier than he expected. Naomi leaned back slightly in her chair, considering him, not judging, but measuring the honesty in what he had offered. And now, she asked. Daniels took a small breath, his eyes no longer dropping. Now I know it is not, he said. Naomi held his gaze for a second longer, then nodded once, a small movement, but enough to mark the shift. That is where it starts, she said. No lecture. No raised tone. Just a line drawn quietly between before and after. Daniels absorbed it, the tension in his posture easing into something more grounded, more aware. He gave a short nod in return. Yes, Captain. The room settled again, the silence returning, but it no longer carried uncertainty. Daniels stepped back slightly, his hand reaching for the door, but he paused before opening it. I will do better, he added, not as a promise to her, but as something he needed to say out loud. Naomi did not respond immediately. She simply looked at him, then gave a slight nod, acknowledging the weight of what he had said without adding to it. Daniels opened the door and stepped out, the hallway light spilling briefly into the room before the door closed again with a soft, controlled click. Naomi's eyes returned to the desk, to the page, to the words she had already written. She picked up the pen once more, the motion smooth, certain, and began to write again, the next line forming without hesitation as the quiet work of change continued, one deliberate decision at a time. The pen slowed, then stopped, its tip resting lightly against the paper as Naomi finished the last word on the page. The sentence did not feel like an ending. It felt like a foundation. She lifted the pen and set it down beside the notepad, aligning it again with quiet precision, then leaned back slightly in her chair, her eyes moving across the lines she had written. The room held steady around her, the soft hum of the building settling into a rhythm that felt almost constant now, like it had always been there, unnoticed until everything else went quiet. Outside her door, footsteps passed again, slower this time, voices lower, as if the shift in leadership had begun to ripple through the space without needing to be announced. Naomi reached for the file at the corner of the desk, pulling it closer and opening it with a smooth motion. Inside were reports, routine entries, observations reduced to lines of text, each one carrying a version of events that depended on who had written it. She turned a page, then another, her eyes scanning quickly but carefully, not missing the small details, the phrasing, the patterns that repeated more often than they should. A phrase caught her attention. Subject appeared non-compliant. She paused there, her fingers resting lightly on the edge of the paper. The words were familiar, too familiar, used often enough to become invisible. She picked up the pen again and circled the line once, the motion deliberate, not aggressive, just clear. The ink stood out against the printed text, marking it, asking a question without writing one. Another knock came, this time firmer, more certain. Naomi closed the file halfway, not fully, leaving the page visible as she looked up. Come in. The door opened to reveal Deputy Chief Warren again, but he was not alone. Ryan stood just behind him, posture straight, uniform composed, but his presence carried something different now, something quieter, more grounded. Warren stepped aside slightly, allowing Ryan to enter first. Ryan took one step into the room, then stopped, the distance between him and the desk measured, respectful. Captain, he said, his voice steady. No hesitation, no uncertainty in the title this time. Naomi met his gaze, her expression unchanged, but attentive. Warren remained near the door, silent, observing. Ryan's hands rested at his sides, not rigid, not loose, just still. I requested to speak with you, he continued, choosing each word carefully. Naomi nodded once, giving him space to continue. Ryan took a small breath, his eyes not leaving hers. What happened earlier, he said, then paused briefly, not searching for words, but making sure the ones he chose were his own. It was not just a mistaken judgment. It was a failure to see clearly. The room stayed quiet, the weight of his words settling naturally, not forced. Naomi leaned forward slightly, her hands resting on the desk again, her posture signaling presence, not authority. And what do you see now? She asked. Ryan did not look away. That respect cannot depend on what I think I know, he said. It has to be there before I decide anything. Naomi studied him for a moment, not testing, not doubting, just measuring the shift he claimed. The circled line on the open file remained between them, visible, silent, but relevant. She reached out and tapped the paper once with her finger, drawing his attention to it. Ryan glanced down, reading the phrase, then looked back up, understanding settling in without explanation. Naomi's voice remained calm. Then start by changing the way you write it, she said. Because words become habits, and habits become actions. Ryan nodded once, slower than before, the meaning of it deeper now. Yes, Captain. Warren remained still by the door, his gaze moving between them, taking in the exchange without interruption. Naomi closed the file gently, the soft sound marking a pause, not an end. She leaned back again, her eyes returning to Ryan. This is not about one stop, she said quietly. It is about what comes next. Ryan held her gaze, no hesitation, no defense. Understood. The word carried weight now, not as agreement, but as responsibility accepted. Naomi gave a small nod, then shifted her attention back to the desk, to the work waiting, the change already in motion. Ryan stepped back, turning toward the door, his posture steady, not the same as before, but not uncertain either. Warren followed him out, the door closing behind them with a soft click, leaving the room in that same controlled stillness. Naomi reached for the pen once more, the motion familiar now, and began to write again, each word placing another quiet step forward into something that would not need to announce itself to be real. The pen moved slower now, not because there was hesitation, but because each word carried intention that did not need to be rushed. Naomi finished the final line and placed a small period at the end, the ink settling into the page with quiet certainty. She did not read it again. She did not need to. Instead, she set the pen down gently and let her hand rest beside it, her fingers still for a moment as the room settled around her. Outside, the window, the city lights remained steady, distant but present, like a reminder that everything continued, even when something had shifted beneath it. She leaned back in her chair, her eyes lifting toward the glass, catching her reflection faintly layered over the skyline. Not the version of her from earlier that night. Not the one standing under flashing lights, measured by someone else's assumptions. This one was different. Not because of the title, but because of what she chose to carry with it. A soft sound echoed in the hallway, footsteps passing, voices low, the rhythm of the station continuing without interruption, but something inside that rhythm had changed, even if it was too subtle to name. Naomi reached for the file again, opening it to the page she had marked. The circled phrase remained there, simple, ordinary, but now it stood out, no longer invisible. She looked at it for a second, then took the pen and drew a single line through the words. Not aggressive, not heavy, just clear. Beneath it, she wrote a new line, slower, more deliberate. Not what was assumed, what was observed. The ink dried almost instantly, but the meaning settled deeper. She closed the file and placed it neatly at the center of the desk, aligning it with the edge, the motion quiet but final. A breath left her slowly, steady, not tension, not relief, just release. She stood, the chair moving back with a soft sound, and walked toward the window. The glass was cool beneath her fingertips when she touched it lightly, grounding, real. The city stretched out in front of her, lights scattered like quiet signals, each one a place where someone was living a moment just as ordinary, just as important as the one she had lived hours ago. Behind her, the office remained still, the desk, the pen, the file, all in place, but no longer waiting. They had already begun. Naomi lowered her hand from the glass and turned slightly, her gaze moving across the room one last time before stepping toward the door. She paused with her hand on the handle, not out of hesitation, but awareness, the kind that comes when a moment has fully settled into meaning. Then she opened it and stepped out into the hallway. The lights above cast a steady glow, the same officers moved through their routines, the same voices filled the air, but now there was a difference, small, almost invisible, carried not in volume but in presence. Naomi walked forward, her steps even, her posture calm, her pace unhurried. No announcement, no command, just movement. And as she passed, a few heads turned, not in surprise, not in recognition of rank alone, but in something quieter, something closer to awareness. She did not stop. She did not look back. The hallway stretched ahead, the work waiting, the change already in motion. And somewhere beyond the walls of the station, on a quiet street where the night had already returned to normal, a moment lingered in memory, not loud, not dramatic, but real. She had not raised her voice. She had not forced the lesson. She had simply stood there and let them see. And that was enough.